Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. This is the podcast where we bring you the parts you might not know, or we shine a light on things from a different perspective. We pride ourselves on being extremely holistic and to bring to you pieces of the healing puzzle to help you become your own healer from the inside out. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Loretta, because she's going to take us through a very exciting chat about one of our organs in our body, the pancreas. So, hello, Loretta, and I look forward to this a lot.
Hello, Antoinette, and thank you for that. So just a bit of context. Why are we talking about the pancreas? Well, first of all, because the pancreas is quite a neglected organ. And secondly, because, and Antoinette said she's happy for me to share this, Antoinette has had certain physical signs and symptoms that she's had for years. And it's taken years for her to finally get a diagnosis that she has a pancreatic problem. Now, the problem is that when we think of pancreas, we think of pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer and diabetes. Those are the three diagnostic labels that come up when for most people, when you think about pancreas. And ironically, medically, those are also the three labels that come up. But there's a condition, well, I don't know, I know it as pancreatic insufficiency, that is almost never diagnosed and leads to loads of signs and symptoms that don't seem to have anything to do with the pancreas. And because of that, this diagnosis is often missed, and people have signs and symptoms that get treated or suppressed or treated like at the point of the symptom, but the cause is never corrected. And as a consequence of that, there's all these downstream problems that happen. So today, I want to talk about this because this is something that I picked up in my practice years ago. So for those of you who don't know, I was in private practice for almost 30 years. And when I first started, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, to tell you the truth. I came out of university, no patients seemed to fit the damn textbook. And when you're in complementary medicine, a lot of people have already been for the tests, and they've either been for the tests and they're all negative, so they don't have a diagnosis, or they have a diagnosis of something that isn't easy to treat medically or isn't treatable medically. So I noticed I had a lot of patients who were in that, like, can't be diagnosed. We're sick, we have these symptoms, and these symptoms can range from fatigue to skin reactions that look like eczema or urticaria, to constipation, diarrhea, symptoms associated with, let's say, irritable bowel, small intestinal dysbiosis, bloating, cramping, colic, palpitations, drops in blood pressure, sudden drops in blood sugar and drops in blood pressure. I mean, all of these weird and wonderful symptoms that actually didn't seem to have a medical diagnosis. And so because I used the Chinese system of energy diagnostics, because I was desperate, because Western diagnosis wasn't working, I found that a lot of people have problems with their pancreas that either don't show up on tests, or the tests are not specific enough to find anything until there's a big problem. So an example of this would be something like diabetes. So when we measure blood glucose, for example, it is a very specific test because it only tests one thing, blood sugar, and it has a very narrow range of normal. So it's a very sensitive test. But long before you become a diabetic, you have changes in your blood sugar, not consistently enough that you get the diagnosis, but it shows a trend. But until your blood sugar is permanently abnormal, you don't get diagnosed as having diabetes. And so this is the problem sometimes with testing, is that the tests are only positive when you've already got pathology. And I've noticed with the pancreas, very often, there doesn't seem to be any real pancreatic pathology, but there are all these downstream problems. So your pancreas, just a little bit of physiology. Your pancreas is an organ that sits on the left, underneath your sort of rib cage, just underneath your stomach. And the tail of your pancreas fits into the little notch or the hilum of your spleen. So your spleen is like a ball, I suppose, and it has like a little notch, and then the tail of the pancreas fits in, sort of like that, okay? For those of you who are watching YouTube, you can just see what I did with my hands. And in Oriental medicine, they don't talk about a pancreas. They just talk about the spleen. And so my understanding is that in Chinese medicine, the spleen and pancreas were considered to be a single organ, all right? So it's like, think of it as an organ complex. So in Oriental medicine, the stomach and the pancreas or the spleen are what they call coupled organs. They work together. And the stomach is the organ that it's associated not only with physical digestion, but it's associated with mentally processing things. So think about it this way. If you eat a big piece of meat, right, you have to bite that, you have to cut that into bite-sized chunks. You have to chew it really well. And then when it gets into your stomach, the stomach acid starts digesting the protein. It does the first part of protein digestion. And it also breaks that food into a pulp, into it like a mush, right? So that now it doesn't look like steak anymore. Now it just looks like pulpy mush, so that when it gets into your small intestine, it can be more easily digested. So think about when you have a mental problem. I don't mean a mental problem as in like a diagnosis. When something happens that is difficult for you to process mentally, that's like getting a massive piece of steak that you've got to think about and ponder and process into these smaller pieces. So the stomach is the thinker in this duo. So it's also related to how do we process. So, you know, when you say something like, the thought of that makes me sick to my stomach. Like, I cannot digest this concept, because it's literally something happens that you find so outrageous. It either happens to you or it happens to someone else, that you are unable to digest it. We use it in our language as well, right? So this is for physical digestion and mental digestion. And then the pancreas and spleen are the feelers. The fine processing happens by means of your pancreas, because your pancreas produces digestive enzymes that allow you to digest protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And that digestion takes place in your small intestine. Now, if you're not producing sufficient digestive enzyme, well, then you're not processing the food. And if you're not processing the food, a lot of that food stuff, especially the proteins, leak through your gut, end up in your bloodstream, and now your immune system goes, this stuff's not supposed to be here, and then you can have an allergic reaction. So when we have food allergies, or we have allergies that come out on our skin, those are because our immune system is overreacting, but it's because the foreign protein is in your bloodstream because it wasn't digested properly. Now, interestingly enough, I just said protein. The first part of protein is digested in your stomach, and your pancreas makes an enzyme called gastrin. I hope this isn't boring. I love the geeky details, okay? So sorry, I'm going to try and make it quick. But your pancreas makes an enzyme called gastrin, and gastrin turns your stomach acid on and off. So when you have too much stomach acid, your gastrin levels drop, and then your stomach levels drop. And when you have too little stomach acid, your gastrin turns on, and it turns on your stomach acid. So when we have reflux, and we are told that's because we have excessive stomach acid, or more often than not, it's because we have too little stomach acid. And we treat that with we have proton pump inhibitors. We take I don't know, either antacids, or we take that medication that inhibits the production of hydrochloric acid. We're treating the problem, which is in the stomach, but the gastrin is the problem because it's not being produced by the pancreas effectively. So can you see that the stomach is what we call the downstream problem, and the cause is actually happening in the pancreas. So you've got one part of your pancreas that produces digestive enzymes and gastrin, and then you've got the other part of your pancreas, which is completely different cells that produce insulin. And the insulin production is part of the problem that we have when we have blood glucose issues. But think about this. Think how amazing this organ is. It produces the enzymes that digests the food so that the food can be broken down into glucose, so that the glucose can go into your bloodstream. And then it also makes the hormone that makes the sugar go out of your bloodstream into your cells so that your cells can use the sugar for energy. I mean, it's an unbelievable system, right? Okay. So those two coupled organs, the stomach is the thinker, the pancreas is the feeler. It's the emotional processor. So when you have something happen that you cannot even begin to process, can you see that you then have extreme emotion that you also can't process? So what ends up happening is you have a weakening in both of those organs. And the emotion associated with the stomach and the spleen and pancreas is worry and anxiety. So now you start getting health issues. So what do? You start getting anxious. Who doesn't get anxious when things going down with your health that you have no regulation or control over? And this is why when you then clean up your diet very often, a lot of these symptoms can improve. But if the pancreas is not producing sufficiently, just cleaning up your diet's not enough, because cleaning up your diet, as great as it is taking the pressure off, but it's not healing the organ. It needs more help. And that's where very often that that section is almost completely overlooked. And it's not only overlooked medically, it's overlooked by complementary medicine practitioners also. Honestly, it's just one of those. It's like, we don't really know too much about the pancreas. We're sure it does what it needs to do, and as long as it's not completely bombing out. So, but pancreatitis is a life-threatening disease. You can die if you have pancreatitis. It's incredibly painful. You have to be hospitalized. The symptoms are severe. If you've got pancreatitis, you're going to know about it, right? And if you have pancreatic cancer, well, you're also going to know about it. But there is a broad spectrum of symptoms that you can have long before pancreatitis and or pancreatic cancer happens. And the other thing is, if you have pancreatic insufficiency, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you're ever going to get pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer. It doesn't mean that, all right? So it doesn't mean that because you have the one, you're more at risk of the others. So worry and anxiety, and the tissue that is governed by the health of the stomach and the pancreas and spleen is the skin. So I said earlier, lots of skin allergies are considered to be allergies, and they're considered to be on the skin. So we treat the skin, or we maybe treat the immune system, or we treat the gut, because in complementary medicine and in functional medicine, the gut is like very important. So now everyone's all about gut health. So we get super proactive about treating our gut, but you still got this pancreas. It's not doing the job, guys. It's still not actually being treated at the root. So that's that. So if your pancreas is not working well, you can have heartburn, indigestion, you can have bloating, you can have colic, you can have constipation, you can have diarrhea, you can have alternating constipation and diarrhea, you can have signs and symptoms that look like irritable bowel syndrome, you can have signs and symptoms that look like GERD, which is that chronic reflux kind of disease, you can have skin allergies. Less common is you can start having cardiovascular symptoms. And the reason why you have cardiovascular symptoms can be things like palpitations, drop in blood pressure. So you imagine, you start having palpitations, you start getting anxious, your blood pressure drops, you start feeling dizzy, you feel nauseous, your blood sugar is sitting in your shoes, you feel like you're going to pass out, it makes you even more anxious. No one's thinking pancreas here. And the reason why we have these cardiac kind of symptoms is because there is a cycle in which the organs nourish and support one another. So the liver and gallbladder nourishes and supports the heart and small intestine. Notice the heart and small intestine are coupled organs, and the small intestine is where the digestion and absorption happens, just by the way. So it's not a coincidence that we get small intestinal symptoms as well when our pancreas is not happy. And the heart and small intestine nourish and support the stomach and pancreas. And so this cycle is supposed to go, imagine it's water. It's going from the liver and gallbladder bucket into the heart and small intestine bucket into the stomach and pancreas bucket. But if things start going awry, and it starts getting blocked in the stomach and pancreas bucket, then it no longer feeds into the lung and large intestine, which is where it's supposed to go next. And what happens is it backs up, and it backs up into the heart and small intestine. And now you start having more complicated digestive disorders, and you can have these cardiac kind of symptoms. And so, we do know this. Some people who think they're having a heart attack are sometimes having incredibly bad indigestion. We know that, right? You get to the emergency room and there's actually nothing wrong with the heart, and it was like incredible reflux that then gives you the chest pain, the pain down the left arm. It's because the stomach, when the stomach, spleen, and pancreas is not working well, the energy backs up into the heart. It can. And then it feels like a heart attack. Now, here's the kicker. This heart and small intestine, the emotion associated with the heart and small intestine organ function, especially the heart, is joy. Now, this can be fake joy, our Instagram kind of, this is what my life looks like. It's all snapshots and holidays and wonderful times. That's pretend joy. And then it can be real joy, that true joy that comes from within, the true joy that is not dependent on what happens in your external circumstances, the true joy that is about being, what's the word? It's like providing for yourself what it is that you need, so that you don't get disappointed when you're not getting it in the outside world. It's about being true to who you really are. It's about not doing all the struggle and the hustling and the pretending. It's about being really true to who you are. And when you can do that, then you step into that radiance. The heart is irradiate, okay? The joy, which is that radiance, doesn't mean that your life is all unicorns and rainbows and lollipops. It just means that even if your life is not that way, you still have a kind of radiance and a kind of joy. You're still capable of taking joy in the small things. So, your life might look like a 3-ringed madhouse circus, but you can still sit in the sun and appreciate the warmth of that. Or you can see the beauty in a flower. You can take joy in the small moments. You can celebrate some of the wins, because it's not all, it's always support and challenge. It's combined. And so a lot of, and we'll probably do a whole episode on the heart. Again, the heart's the same. Unless you've got a heart problem, there's nothing wrong with your heart. Well, actually, how many people do we know who actually truly are joyful? I know very few. I'll be quite honest with you. Very, very few. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't think of too many. And so many of us are looking for purpose, and we're looking for fulfillment, and we're looking for joy. And we don't realize that a lot of that is affected by what we believe about ourselves and the world, and how well we metabolize the world. That is our food, what we eat and what we drink, and what we experience from the world, what we experience from the news, what we experience from people around us, what we experience in our relationships. And so when that stomach and spleen pancreas axis is not working well, then we can have that energy backing up and we can get these cardiac type symptoms. Now, I want to just mention that the health of the liver and the the health of the stomach, spleen, and pancreas is governed and controlled by the health of the liver and the gallbladder. And the health of the liver and the gallbladder is where all our disappointment lives. So every time you have an expectation that you have to be a certain way and you can't live up to that expectation, that disappointment affects your liver and gallbladder. And your liver and gallbladder governs your certainty and your trust, literally your faith in yourself, others, life, God, whatever you want to think, right? And that is what helps us to metabolize, actually. So the importance of this little triad, it's like think of it like a semicircle with a line that goes. So here's your liver and gallbladder is on the left. Your heart and small intestine is in the center. Your stomach, spleen, and pancreas is on the right. And they nourish each other in that semicircle when they're going in a clockwise direction. And then there's also a controlling cycle between the liver and gallbladder and the stomach and pancreas. So what happens to us energetically? You might go, okay, well, so why does this even happen? Like, why do we get pancreatic insufficiency? Well, there are a number of reasons why you could have pancreatic insufficiency. It can be lifestyle. So please, before we all go and swim in the guilt pond, flay ourselves with a cat of 9 guilt tails, this is not so that you can feel bad. It's just information. So sometimes it can be lifestyle. If you've been eating a food, for example, that is very difficult for you to digest, or just difficult to digest, or you've been eating lots of, processed kind of foods, lots of chemicals, can be a problem. Alcohol is a massive issue for the pancreas. We haven't had an episode on our smoking. Antoinette showed me the smoking signal. Smoking is a massive issue for the pancreas. It's a massive issue for everything, right? But it's a massive issue for the pancreas as well. And so lifestyle can do that. But worry and anxiety, excessive stress, having trauma that you don't know how to deal with and process can also lead to this. One energetically, and listen, I don't like to do this like painting by numbers thing, but the pancreas is largely associated with a rejection trauma wound. In generalization, rejection trauma, okay? There's not enough love out there. And because there's not enough love out there, there can't be enough love in here. And, if you feel like you've been rejected by the outside world, particularly if it's been a caregiver, like a parent, then it's very difficult to break that cycle of doing that to yourself. So what ends up happening is when we have those kind of wounds, we generally hate on ourselves without even knowing about it. We're hypercritical. We become perfectionistic. We beat ourselves up. Okay, now we all do that, no matter what's happening with us, right? But people who have a trauma, a childhood rejection trauma, very often, right? They struggle to metabolize the world. Think about this. If one of the people that are supposed to make you feel the safest and make you feel the most valuable in your perception lets you down, then how do you digest that? That's like almost an indigestible, unmetabolizable kind of thing, right? And so that continues unconsciously driving what can actually happen in your physiology. So it very often is around that feeling of rejection, of not good enough, of needing to be more perfect, of struggling and trying and failing. Like, I try so hard. I put so much effort into my friendships. I put so much effort into my relationships. And yet I always feel like I'm betrayed or let down. So it's either the other person is not giving me what I need, or there's something wrong with me. And that's why I can't sustain the relationship. That's very often associated with this. Now, more prosaically, we produce less stomach acid and fewer digestive enzymes as we get older. That is it's common. It's common that people over the age of 65 there's been quite a few studies done in people with stomach acid. It's known that over the age of 65, your stomach acid levels drop significantly, and it will be worse depending on what's happening in your lifestyle. Now, the good news is there are supplements that can supplement stomach acid. There are digestive enzymes that you can take that can supplement those digestive enzymes. Now, you might go, yeah, well, isn't that going to just suppress it even more? Strangely enough, no. What it does is it allows it's like telling your pancreas and your stomach it gets to go to the Bahamas for 3 months while you are taking the enzymes that it doesn't have to make so that it can rest and regenerate and recover. Did you have your hand up, Antoinette? Go.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interject. I've got a lot to say about lots of what you've said. It's also on point, but I just wanted to say about the digestive enzymes, because I'm the patient here, is in my case, the very bad bacteria from the food not being digested properly was sitting in my colon. And that's why I was having some severe reactions like passing out or nearly passing out. And taking a very good natural digestive enzyme without the backup of an antibiotic was making it worse for me because it was feeding the unhealthy gut bacteria. So you're 100% right. But I was very blessed to find a very good specialist eventually, who saw the whole picture of my condition, because I, for years, have been trying to sort it out with lifestyle changes and natural things. So, sorry, I don't mean to contradict you. I'm just saying it's so interesting, the holisticness of all of this. Sorry, I'll comment on the rest when you're finished.
Okay, cool. I'm nearly done. So yes, I mean, what Antoinette now, she makes a very valid point. So it also depends. So listen, it depends on severity. So if the insufficiency is mild, then, and there hasn't been a chance for all these massive downstream disruptions, then that is less of an issue. But it all depends on how many of these symptoms in the symptom cluster you actually have, right? So this is general advice, guys. Please, I'm not suggesting everyone should run out and go and buy hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes and assume they're going to be cured. The point I'm actually trying to make is that the solution from a treatment, a conventional treatment, not looking at all the energetic stuff, is not super complicated, especially if you catch it early. But it gets more and more complicated the longer you've had it and the more advanced it is, obviously. Okay. And what Antoinette says is quite correct. So you can imagine if you've got bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine, and you've got a complete gut dysbiosis in your large intestine because this has been going on forever and a day. If you just improve the digestive enzyme production, it's not going to be enough. And in fact, it can sometimes make the symptoms be worse, which is why you need to actually get some help, right? So, we're all about you becoming your own healer, but that includes knowing who to see when, because it doesn't mean you have to do it alone. It just means you need to get help when you can't fix this yourself. When my car breaks down, I get a mechanic. I know nothing about cars. When my body breaks down, I get myself. When I'm not any good, I get someone else, because quite frankly, it's very difficult to treat yourself. Okay. So we're just going to bear that in mind. I was just going to say, what else was I going to say? So I think actually that's more or less it. Last point that I wanted to make on this whole energetic thing about the pancreas. So the less we are capable of mentally processing something, and the more averse we are to dealing with our emotional pain, the more difficult this gets to actually truly heal the pancreas and the stomach spleen axis, all right? Because the pancreas and the spleen are the feelers. And so even if that is, when I say even if, it's about processing the emotion around these big rejection wounds, as I said, I try so hard, but why does nothing ever work? And, it can really be as bad as I try so hard to be a good person. Why has God forsaken me? It literally, I mean, it can have that kind of spiritual thing as well, which is quite common. And then what happens is we feel guilty because actually we shouldn't be having those kind of thoughts about our spirituality, because I don't know, we don't have enough faith or whatever it is, right? And then we get onto the bandwagon of beating ourselves up about not having been good enough, right? So please, I don't want anyone to beat themselves up about this. It is what it is. We all have our stuff, all right? I've never really had a massive pancreatic issue, but I've had liver and gallbladder issues my whole life, because one of my biggest lessons in life is to trust that it's going to be okay, is to have the faith that I don't need to control everything, because if I don't control everything, then everything's going to go to hell in a handcart. That's my limiting belief and my fear. So everyone has something different, right? And this information is not so that we can self-flagellate. This information is so that we can go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. This is a possibility. Now that I know what it is, now I can make work of it. I can work with it, not fixing it. I can use it to work with my body, with my team of healthcare providers, whoever it is that you're working with, my healer, my spiritual connection, whoever, whatever you want to do. It's information that actually allows you to start getting a clear path of where it is that you need to go. So I think my take-home message is that a lot of signs and symptoms that are downstream get treated, and then we don't get better, or we get partially better, but we don't quite get better. And that's because you have to treat at the place where the problem is happening. You've got to treat the cause, right? Even from an organ perspective. And a lot of the symptoms, because they seem so completely unrelated to the pancreas, because they're not pancreatic cancer, pancreatitis, or diabetes, we tend to not think about that organ. So it is a wildly overlooked organ. So just some short, easy hacks, right? Obviously, try and eat whole food, not processed. Reduce your chemical intake. If you've got an issue with your pancreas, ditch the alcohol, all right? If you think you have an issue with your pancreas, ditch the alcohol anyway, okay? I'm sorry, I know that sounds prescriptive. Do you know how to feel your feelings? Can you feel your feelings safely? Do you have a tool? If you don't, please go back to some of our previous episodes. We've spoken about this a lot, okay? Does it mean you've got to go and dig back to 20 years or 50 years in your childhood? Well, not necessarily. Can you feel the feelings that you're currently having? What other symptoms do you have? Do you have some of these downstream symptoms? Now, this doesn't always mean you've got a pancreatic problem, okay? So remember, if you're not a doctor, you're not actually trained to make a diagnosis, but you can take this information or similar information to you and go, do you think I could have a test to have my pancreas test? Oh, by the way, that actually leads me into what are the tests that you can do? And here's the other problem. There are very few tests that actually give you a very clear indication of what's happening with your pancreas. There is one particular enzyme called amylase. Pancreatic amylase helps us to digest carbohydrates, and we can actually test pancreatic amylase levels. So you can have a blood test to test your pancreatic amylase. It's one thing. And a stool test will very often show you whether the food is digested or not. So if there's loads of undigested food in the stool, it may indicate that there is a pancreatic insufficiency. So it doesn't mean that you're going to tell your healthcare provider what they need to do, but you can actually just go, hey, is it possible that this might be a thing, and could we test it? They're two relatively simple tests, not super complicated, not wildly expensive, and it can actually shed light on what could be going on for you. I think that's it. Antoinette, your turn.
Sure, that was a very amazingly holistic perspective. Yes, just to add, Loretta, that this can take 20 to 30 years to get to a point of where I'm at, or any cancer or any chronic disease. It's not something you wake up with one day and a couple of weeks later you get a diagnosis. And it's always a combination of things. I think that's why we bring what we bring in such a holistic way, but we bring stuff that people may not ever have integrated into their healing package, even if they are self-healers, like the organ energetics, the mind stuff, the emotional stuff. Yes, so I mean, so many threads of my journey weave together to have obviously in hindsight got me to a point of having a pancreatic problem. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that, but just to say there is a stool test. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, but that's how I eventually got diagnosed. I've been going from one natural practitioner to another allopathic one to kinesiologists. I've been going round and round for a long time, as Loretta knows, and I've mentioned now and again on the podcast, because about 4 years ago already, I had my first unexpected blackout, and then I didn't have it again for ages, and then I started getting like a skin rash reaction, which occasionally would go anaphylactic very badly, and that didn't happen very often, and I couldn't really get to the bottom of what was triggering it. So I was having skin reactions, and they could go off in any kinds of direction, and I wasn't having them all the time. Sometimes I wouldn't have it for months, but once when I was traveling, I had one every week for 6 weeks. So in hindsight, I know why it was happening. Once or twice it choked me. Oh, I've had major heart kind of issues going on, yeah, now that you've said it. But by the time I really started investigating this at the second half of last year, I hadn't slept. If I look back, I haven't slept actually for years. So of course, especially when we are our own healers, it's so interesting, this journey. It's so good to be your own healer. Take your healing into your own hands. I tend very much to natural rather than allopathic, but so many of the things I did because I didn't know, trying to sort out my issues, just didn't work, or they actually worked against me in a way because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I haven't been sleeping, and I didn't even really, I thought there was something else. I've tried to figure that out in many other ways. I started having, digestive problems and colon problems, extreme brain fog at times, occasionally headaches, sinus problems, on and off, sometimes lung problems, breathing problems, never enough to completely stop me in my tracks. In fact, I had a 2-page list of symptoms. So I started with my specialist to help me with my cancer, because I still have checkups once a year. And he just kept on saying, I can't find anything wrong with you. But when I started losing 1 kilogram a week of weight, that's when the doctors started really paying attention. I started losing 1 kilo or 1.5 kilos a week earlier this year. And all these reactions I was having were getting worse. I eventually found out from a kinesiologist that I had a sulfur allergy, but I didn't know the allergy, the passing out, the not sleeping, the brain fog, the breathing issues at times, the sinus issues. I mean, I can go on and on. 2-page symptoms were all linked to the same issue, and that was my pancreas. So I had a CT scan, I had loads of blood tests, I had an abdomen ultrasound, I had heart tests, and nobody could find anything until I found a gastrointestinal specialist who did one stool test where he picked up that my pancreas wasn't functioning as in producing digestive enzymes. So, And some of the things I was doing to help myself, like eating more vegetables, I stopped eating red meat, and it's obvious why I couldn't eat that now in hindsight, but I started eating more vegetables. But some vegetables trigger a reaction as much as some unhealthy food does. So it's been quite a journey. But Loretta, I'm waffling around a bit, but just to say to people, it can be confusing sometimes. But if you persistently show up to look at your own health in a contextualized way with this mind, body, soul stuff, and getting to the bottom of your symptoms, and just do whatever you need to do that. You also need to take ownership of your own healing. Like if you need to try and just push it with the doctor, as Loretta says, or go to a kinesiologist or work with Loretta, or do whatever you have to do, because your body's trying to tell you something. Our
100%.
body always tells us when something's out of alignment. So I physically got to the bottom of this and I can treat it. By the way, it can just be an old age thing. It just happens to people sometimes in old age. Although Loretta and I both know it's never just age.
Oh.
Sorry, Loretta. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing that I didn't say is medication can do this too. So if you've had, so for example, like Antoinette had chemotherapy, that can damage your pancreas is incredibly chemically sensitive.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
Chemically sensitive. So someone like Antoinette who had, sorry, Antoinette, I'm talking as if you're not here. So like you had chemo, again, one doesn't want to go, oh, well, everything is because of chemo. But holy moly, chemo, as great as it is to help you heal, it is incredibly toxic also. I mean, this is not knocking chemo, it just is a fact. So your pancreas, because it's so chemically sensitive, can be affected. And it doesn't have to be chemotherapy. It can be long-term, any kind of medication, actually. The more chemical medication you have to take for a longer period of time, the more likely it is that you're going to have some compromise, which is also why this is more common in older people.
Interesting. And actually, Loretta, my digestive, I'd never had a colon or digestive problem in my life until the year 6 or 8 months after chemo. It's been ongoing ever since then, and that was 8 years ago. So yes, but I also probably, it's very unlikely I'd be alive if I hadn't done those chemical drugs. So, and I knew that they'd have some side effects on my body. So yeah, but you're 100% right. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't do chemo. It's just that we really want you to be aware of how holistic this all is. But so I am going to take some tablets now for a few months as a bridge. Working together, though, for me, really, this came down to the link between the pancreas and the heart, the joy stuff. Loretta, I was already told, as I've shared before 8 years ago, I need to find joy in order to heal my cancer. I've had an abandonment trauma, as we've shared before on the podcast. I have been exceptionally hard on myself and self-critical. I have done the feeling your feelings work. I am aware of all of this. But one thing I haven't done well is bring in positive emotions. We talk a lot about how to process the hard emotions, how to feel your feelings. I have done that, and I do it all the time. But Marcia made a point, Marcia, who did the food episode with us, how often do we ride the wave and sit with our really great feelings when we're sitting in the sun and we're feeling so peaceful? How often do we sit and ride that wave? And when we do have these moments of pure joy, I don't know if it's just me, but when she said that, I thought, yeah, I'm sitting with the anger and I'm sitting with the fear. But how often do I really sit with that beautiful 100%. Emotion? Yeah, sorry, yes, carry on.
And especially if we are hard on ourselves, which almost all of us are, then we tend to gloss over the positive ones. I just want to put a little caveat here. We also have some people, whoever, not necessarily you or me, have a tendency, actually me, maybe, have to admit, to spend more time in the positive emotions. But some people have very little practice in spending time in the positive emotions. So this is, again, why it's not, there's not a one size fits all. This is not like everyone needs to sit only with their negative emotion, but an exercise, just a little tool that I found really useful for positive emotion is to ask myself, how would I love to feel today? First of all, how do I feel today? What is really going on with me? So I'm not avoiding it, right? I'm not trying to bypass it. I'm like, okay, I'm anxious. I feel overwhelmed. I feel frustrated. How would I love to feel? Okay, well, I'd love to feel joyful. And then what I ask myself is, what one thing can I do today? Like, what can I do that's going to give me a bit more joy? Because when I do the thing, then I'm taking ownership of it. I'm not waiting for the world to bring me joy. I am creating the joy for myself. So for me, music normally does that. So I have a happy playlist. And honestly, when I'm feeling really awful, I listen to the whole happy playlist because honestly, there are some of those songs I just cannot not sing with and feel better. So they're easy little hacks. Some of us, well, actually what I'm trying to say, some of us need to practice the positive emotions as much as we need to practice the negative emotions. However, we must just be very vigilant that we don't use it as a tool to bypass feeling the negative ones.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, for me, my intuition told me to dance, and I've been like struggling to dance. But lately I've got this, I'm going to swear we might be kicked off in India or something.
No,
I've got this fuck it bucket dance. It's helped me so
Love it.
much. Like because I can get very self-berating and angry. And that doesn't mean I'm a highly dysfunctional person. I'm sharing this because I'm able to see this and work with it now. And it's incredible how when you start allowing your intuition to drive it and you don't always do something someone else has told you to do, it can also change day to day. Maybe today this is helpful, but I've been doing this dance like a maniac and just making up my own kind of rap song about put it in the bucket, all the anger or the irritation. And then it's like, and once I've done all that, so I've done my dance and I've kind of sung a rap song, and then I take the bucket up into the light or whatever. And that's just worked so well for me recently because I'm getting my anger and frustration out.
I think that's a beautiful process.
And I'm doing a dance. But yeah, I suppose we don't have to carry on a lot more. I just want to say to end off that please, it sounds so complex, and it sounds maybe quite stressful. Or Antoinette took 4 years to get a diagnosis, and now she's got this serious thing because she did chemo. Actually, it's all good. My body has just given me an opportunity yet again to really become my own healer from the inside out. And it hasn't always been easy, but I can tell you something yet again, which is a fundamental truth. One of the reasons I'm still alive now, even though I've had anaphylactic reactions that are terrifying, is because I have the capacity when I really needed to stay calm in those situations and to work with my raging fear and to engage with my body and go into my body and speak to my body. And so sometimes it's just necessary, actually, that the body screams a little bit to bring us back into alignment. So we don't have to be perfect. We don't need to not have negative thoughts. We don't need to be able to do all this in one day. But it's just a context, I hope, that we've offered you. And thank you, Loretta, for bringing us your extraordinarily helpful insight that we do need to know how the organs of our body worked. I actually got out a picture of the human body this weekend. I thought, Antoinette, you, of all people, you didn't even know where your pancreas sits in your body.
Yeah, and I just make an assumption that everyone knows that. Well, because I went to university and did anatomy for 2 years.
And the information that you bring, Loretta, because you gave me a free coaching session when I first got this diagnosis about the connection between all the organs and how they all work together, and how, it's my heart actually that I have to work on to heal this. So my pancreas may never produce digestive enzymes again, and maybe I'll need to take strong digestive help, but I can work on my heart and on my more joy. And yes, but it's a journey. Yeah.
I just want to say your pancreas might never work like a 20-year-old's, but quite frankly, I think that as soon as you give the body, as soon as you get the message that the disease is trying to tell you, the body has an unbelievable capacity to recover. And
Do you know, Loretta,
I don't see any reason why your pancreatic cells will not start producing digestive
Okay, watch
enzymes.
this space. In 3 months' time, I'm going to
Let's see which one of us is right.
I'm going to be telling our audience my pancreas is 100%, and the doctor will be shocked. But I think that we just need to know how to work with these things, because once we start engaging with our bodies and listening to the message, and the body will take us home to our higher selves always. So thank you, Loretta, for being this amazingly integrative person.
Thank you. I'm just going to do a little punt for myself and say that I offer a consultation which is called a holistic health analysis. If you are interested in getting the energetic perspective on what is going on with you. So I have a form that I send you. You fill in the form so that we don't have to waste time on that stuff. I get all that information from you that I need. And then we have a consultation, we have a chat, and I will give you an energetic breakdown, as I've done now, about what's going on here, and put together a simple treatment plan that you can implement together with your doctor, your own healthcare. I'm not really that interested in the job of dispensing and prescribing medication, to tell you the truth. So I'm happy for you to work with anyone else that is prepared to do that part, but I will give you some simple tips and tricks that you can use. And if you want to do that, it's once off. It's no obligation. You don't have to do 25,000 consults after. So if you're interested in something like that, please just drop me an email and I will send you all the particulars.
And honestly, I highly, highly recommend it. I've had the privilege, and by the grace of God, I have Loretta every week in my life, and she has done consultations for me at no cost. And honestly, it's invaluable. So spend the money, and it could really make a massive, massive difference just to know what's going on. Yeah. So just do it.
Thank you.
Loretta. Okay,
great.
Are we done?
Thanks, everyone. Yes, please, if you found this useful, share this with your friends. If there's any particular organ you really want to know about, let us know. We will be going through all of them. And maybe some of the systems as well. But if there's anyone in particular that you want to know about, drop us an email, and we can make that the next one in this little series. And share this with your friends, please, if you found it useful. We really appreciate it. If you are watching us on YouTube, please like it and subscribe to our channel. And we'd love it if you could put a comment, because it helps the algorithm and more people will see it. So here's to your healing. Hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, you got this, eh? And we got you.